Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to launch my first kind of video cast of my thoughts and the things that have been going on around the world. I am very, very passionate about speaking, about sharing, about advocating for other people. And this has become so much more real since having my sons that entered into a school system. And being in a school system, a public school system, has always had its challenges since I was a little girl. Then goes back to the beginning of the education system for Black people. And I actually did my studies on that at the University of Washington, and that was what my dissertation and thesis were about. Is about the disproportionate outcomes for Black folks in the education system, specifically in Seattle. So I have been working on these things for some time. And some of you that know from my friends and my family and my circle know that my kids very early on had an incident that happened in preschool, all the way in preschool. So we've been having these kind of intentional educational conversations since they were 3 and 4 years old. And so I put together some things, some resources, some activities, some ways that we can begin to educate our children, our babies, and then begin to undo some of the systemic racism that has affected people of color. And it is going to take a community, it's going to take you and me to partner together, to work together, to love one another, to be able to undo the things that we are seeing happening over and over and over. History just keeps repeating itself because we have not made the change within ourselves. And so my goal is to help kind of coach us through and walk through this together and give some practical application in ways that we can make our communities, our world a better place. And I also want you to know that my approach is really kind of simple. My approach to this thing is, if we loved one another, these things wouldn't be happening. But because hate and fear and all sort of other feelings have been sown into America's DNA, we have not made any progress. So when we begin to sow love into our DNA, things can change. And later we're going to discuss the characteristics of love. Because if we were really going and approaching this thing from that lens, these things wouldn't be happening. So we have to begin to love. And I know that sounds cliche and I know it sounds simple. Maybe you've heard it over and over. But we're going to break down and talk further about the characteristics of love. Because maybe we just don't know what true love is and what the characteristics of love are to be able to give that love. And so we're going to spend some time on that. What I've also learned is that not only was hate and discord and anger and fear and all those things sown into America's DNA, but we were taught that. And even if I know because some of my white friends and my Black friends and Asian friends, Samoan friends, we've been having these conversations a lot. I've had these conversations for many, many years, actually since I was a little girl. I'm very, very passionate about this stuff. And what I've learned is that there are some of us that really don't believe that we were taught one thing or the other. We would, advocate and say, my mom never taught me to hate anybody, or my dad never said a bad word. But what we fail to realize is that there were systems and there were structures, there was media, there is writing, there's our education system, there's our medical system, there's all these different systems and ideas and opinions and exposure and family that are in place that have built who we are. And some of us have benefited from what we call white privilege. And some of my friends feel guilty for having white privilege. And one thing that I want you to know is that having white privilege is a privilege, and embrace it. You have it, and it's a benefit. The reason why we bring it up is because we're saying that all people should have this privilege. That's the only difference. I would love to have this privilege. So don't be ashamed of the privilege that you have, because it has gotten you somewhere. It has gotten you access to good health care. It has gotten you access to good education. It has gotten you access to financial property and health and wealth, and has kept you out of the prison system. So those are privileges. It has kept you from being followed. It has kept you from being chased down, killed by police. It is a privilege. It is a privilege to be able to send your children outside and not think about someone hurting them, not think about someone harassing them. So don't feel guilty for having this privilege. It's a privilege that we all should be afforded, is what we're trying to say. And to think that we need all of us to be one color, we're not. We don't need to be the same color. We don't need to have the same hair type. I believe that God likes a variety, which is why we were created so differently. The different shades of skin tone, the different textures of hair, different color eyes, different size lips, different size hands and nose. Those were all on purpose. It would be very boring if we all looked the same. So don't try to change yourself. Don't feel bad. Don't feel guilty for being white. Don't feel bad for being black. Don't feel excluded for being Asian. You need to embrace who you are, because you were designed intentionally. You are you on purpose. There's no one else like you in this whole entire world. So I want you to begin to love yourself first, because it starts first with us. We have to look in the mirror every day, literally every day, and train ourselves to say, I am made perfect. I am who I am on purpose. The world needs me on purpose. And you have to train yourself to love yourself, because that's the only way that we're going to ever be able to give love to anyone else. The only way that I'm going to be able to, in my case, love my community, to love my friends, to love my children, to love my husband, is to love myself and to understand why I was created, what I bring to the table, and what makes you unique. And including the flaws. No makeup, like, ooh, been in quarantine, all these different things that are going on. And I'm like, ooh, my arms are showing. But I have to learn and teach myself to love myself, no matter what, because we live in a world that has taught us to hate ourselves, that has taught us to be overcome with what our imperfections are, how we should change them, what the remedies are to change them, how to get our skin to be flawless, put some foundation on that rubs off my white dress. And nothing against makeup, but it should not be a mask for you to really love yourself. That stuff comes off, and you are who you are at the end of the night, and you have to love who you are and recognize that. So, sorry, I went on a little tangent there, but I want us to know we got to love ourselves. We have to love our beautiful skin. We have to love our beautiful hair, our long hair, short hair, whatever hair. We have to learn to love that. And I want to help facilitate that and to grow that. And example, I have 4 children, and I have 3 amazing sons who are literally my world. They are my life. I love them so much. And I thank God that I've been so intentional to teach them and to train them the things that I wish that I was taught and trained. And we lived in a different time. But I have taken the time to sit down with my sons. I have taken time to saturate them with words of encouragement and positive attributes about themselves. I have sat down and molded them and shaped them and taught them to love people. It is a job in itself. Being a mom, and a mom who is very intentional about the content her kids hear, the material they're exposed to, the people they're exposed to, the places they go. That is so much work because it's left me without babysitters. But one thing that I know from my childhood is that if you cannot be intentional in all those things that go into being a child, if you can't be intentional about what you teach them, what you read to them, what you show them, the world will do it for you. The world will teach your children what it wants to teach them, and oftentimes will result in what we see right now. We see teachers, we see police officers, we see doctors, we see our community members, we see people in our own family, even ourselves. We see that we are a result of not being taught to love, not being taught to respect, not being taught to understand, partner with others in our community. We know how we all turned out, and we know those things that I'm talking about. So it's for you to go to decide, not me, for you to go and dig deep and decide, what is it that I was taught and what is it that I want to teach? And you have to make a stance on that. And then the conversations with our children can begin.